What's up, fam? It's the Bro Capitalist coming at you today. We're going to get a little philosophical here. It's a lot to unpack here. I'm going to be talking about The Last of Us. I'm going to talk about the cultural war battleground, which I believe is genx, and glyphosate, which is AKA Roundup. And I'm going to tie that all together in a little bow and present to you why America's already dead and your children just don't know it yet. And maybe you don't know it yet. Okay, so if I say America's already dead, that implies it was alive at one point, right? So, yes, I believe America, as the founding fathers intended America to be, that pretty much went to the wayside during the Wilson administration. That's like early 1900s, right? Where you got all these social programs coming in. Not to say that the programs are bad. I'm just saying that that's not, when they said send us your poor so that they can be on welfare, like that wasn't included, right? So yeah, with the creation of the Federal Reserve Bank and all these social programs, I believe what the founding fathers intended, that was the big chisel off that block, right? We're chiseling away from that foundation. And we get 100 years later, and I'm pretty sure America of today is just will be totally unrecognizable to them. And so how did we get here? Well, I'll tell you how we got here. Let me remind those who may be my age or older what America used to be, and tell those who may be younger what America used to be. So I grew up born early 70s rather, and that's Gen X. I'm right there. And Gen X, I say it's the battleground because we're old enough to recall, or we've been around long enough to recall the previous generation's values and how they were, handed down to us. The medium in which they were handed down to us, these values were first, throughout human history, it was just a spoken word sitting around the campfire. Hey, there's tigers over there. Don't go over there. Men protect the family, mother nurture the kids, these word of mouth stuff. Then when you get to America, you have that plus the written word. Fast forward a bit, you get the radio, the values that went out via that medium included God, country, family, individual responsibility, agency. We valued competition in the marketplace. What else? We valued the victor over the victim. We understood there were winners and losers, and we valued confrontation. There's a saying, iron sharpens iron. You compete against the best to make you better, right? Those were the values that came down to me. And there's a noticeable shift that I believe Generation X can see better than any other generation. The generation before us, they may be checked out. You're 80, 90 years old, you just like chilling. You really, unless you deep into politics, you're probably not even paying attention. And then like the Alpha generation or Gen Z, they're too young to really comprehend what my grandparents instilled upon me, right? They're not in it yet. So that's what I'm saying. I believe we're in the battleground. Now, what has changed? Well, the values that the narrative pushes out into society is the values in the narrative. If you picture the narrative as a river going downstream, right? The values being dropped into that river has changed. So now instead of God, family, country, it's more about community, acceptance over conflict, over confrontation, I should say. There's plenty of conflict. Big government over small government, victimization, and the lack of agency. And I'm going to give an example right quick. So I heard about this story of two college students that were just drunk, totally inebriated, and sex ended up happening. Dude's charged with rape, and I don't know if that was justified or not, but I'm just presenting a scenario. I'm gonna put that scenario in 2020 today's stand of. I'm gonna judge it by today's morality, and I'm gonna go back and judge it in 1975's morality or whatever. Today, that dude was charged with rape, and it's all about how she was a victim of his actions, right? It's very little to no discussion about her responsibility in that situation, right? Now, before you get all mad, just let me compare that with 1975. Same thing happens, two drunk college kids, sex takes place. She says she was raped. Of course, he is demonized, like vilified. But there is a conversation about, young lady, did you put yourself in a position for something bad to happen to you? You at least have that degree of responsibility to ensure your own safety, right? Not saying that doesn't take place today. I'm not speaking in absolutes. I'm just saying there was more of an emphasis on those values of agency, self-responsibility back then than there are today. Another example of that is Andrew Tate, who's currently in jail in Romania for whatever reasons. I don't really care. But what I do care about is two women associated with him came forth to tell this judge that, hey, we were volunteer. He didn't coerce us to do anything. We voluntarily did everything. We love the guy. We're not being trafficked. We willingly did whatever we wanted to do for him. The judge said, you're brainwashed. Get out my court. Like, now this is in Romania, not America, but come on, man. Like, so these women have no agency at all? It's up to the government to protect them, to make decisions for them, to, so it's a lot of that going on now, as opposed to back then. And I think Gen X is in a perfect situation to comprehend what did happen and comprehend what is happening, right? So I believe the battleground is in Gen X. Now, how did that happen? Right? How did those values shift so abruptly in less than a generation, basically? Major values, like what makes America America, right? These values have shifted over the course of almost a decade, probably, let alone a generation. I'm going to suggest that this has happened via conflict, social conflict. And by means of, and I love this word, weaponized altruism. By means of weaponized altruism, meaning, oh, let's help the poor Black people. Oh, let's help the crazy man. It's not his fault he's crazy. It's not his fault he turned to drugs. Let's donate money to this cause to help this person do something. Now, that's all well and good, but then you weaponize it. And when you're like, hey, I didn't tell this guy to smoke cocaine or meth. It ain't my fault he doing that. He should bear responsibility for himself. Oh, you're crazy. You're mean, right? So it's that weaponized altruism. When you weaponize altruism, meaning unless you give 100% into their narrative that everybody's a victim, if you don't consider everybody a victim, then they turn that around, weaponize it against you, and call you, mean, hateful. In terms of, if you don't want to help some kid in the inner city, right, then you're a racist. Or if you don't want to see, like when I get to this Last of Us episode 3, if you don't want to see a whole hour about a love story that really doesn't have anything to do with the game it's based off of, then you're homophobic. So it's this weaponized altruism that leads to social conflict. And the social conflict is very important to certain people called Marxists, right? And their social conflict started way back in the day with class conflict. You got money, you don't have money, please conflict, right? So you start to destroy a society, a country internally. Well, in America, class conflict, you don't hear too much about that. You just hear about the billionaires, right? And everybody else, but it's just not enough. I don't think the numbers are enough, right? And plus, that line of thinking doesn't hold up, because when you're talking about billionaires, as a side note, Jeff Bezos is a billionaire because you keep shopping on Amazon, right? His salary when he was working there was like $100 and something $100,000 a year. However, the stock he owned, because you kept shopping at Amazon, kept going up. He paid. So, yeah. Now, let me get back on track here. You got class conflict, not so much in America, but definitely race conflict. And when did that come up? Basically, when Obama came on the scene, it started to really get weaponized. Political racism really got weaponized. And now you see that and conflict regarding gender or sex, right? And that brings me to The Last of Us, episode 3, review bomb despite widespread acclaim. I believe this is manufactured social conflict so that we can destroy ourselves from within. And the people who are battling this or can see this fight clearer than others, I believe, is Gen X. Like I said, if you're 80, 90 years old, you probably could care less about The Last of Us game for sure. You're probably not even watching this series because you may not have HBO Max. So you kind of checked out. The younger generations, they probably played the game and they're probably watching episode 3, but they don't realize, they're just, taking in what's given. They thinking it's normal. Like, this is the norm. It's coming from TV. This is what's happening, right? We're just soaking it in. But Generation X is like, whoa, what's going on here? Why y'all doing that, right? So let me read this article real quick. The Last of Us, episode 3, review bomb, blah, blah, blah. Despite the widespread acclaim for its love story between Frank and Bill, The Last of Us episode 3 is suffering from a review bombing campaign. The Last of Us is a true two-form adaptation of the video game and follows Joel and Ellie through a post-apocalyptic wasteland, with the latter being humanity's last hope for finding immunity of this disease. However, episode 3 represents a change in focus for the series as it follows Frank and Bill instead of Joel and Ellie. And that was my complaint. If you watch my last video, I said what they're going to do is find a way to push an LGBTQ narrative. Somehow they're going to do it, right? And am I opposed to that? No. It's how they do it. It's for conflict. In my opinion, it's for conflict. For example, in The Last of Us, the game, you had Frank and Bill. You played alongside Frank. Frank was cool as hell. He was snarky. He had attitude. He had skills. He's booby trapped the whole town. Him and Ellie went at it, back and forth, smart ass remarks and all this stuff. And you found out at the end of his time in the game that he was gay, and you found, spoiler alert, you saw his old partner, they had split up and went their separate ways, but they came across his old partner who had killed himself, right? So during this game, you find out that one of the major players is gay. I don't know, I don't recall any conflict about that. And the game came out in 2012, 2013. If there was conflict, very minimal, right? But let's keep going. The Last of Us, did I miss anything? It narrates two men who survived the early days of worldwide infection and came to fall in love amidst the devastation. The Last of Us Part 3's heart-wrenching episode explores, romance in a world of zombies and devastation, and it has earned the love of audience and critics. Unfortunately, it has also earned the attention of review bombs who went on IMDb to hammer the project by providing 27,000 reviews, rating the episode a 1 out of 10 at the time of the writing. The episode currently sits at 8.0 rating, significantly less than the first two episodes, which hold a 9.2 and a 9.3 respectively. First of all, from 8 to 9 isn't a significant difference. 8 out of 10 isn't bad. And the 27,000, they don't tell you. Okay, was there more of this? Okay. One of the many reasons that the episode is earning the love is that The Last of Us avoided anti-gay tropes by depicting a gay love story without unnecessary tragedy or violence against the central characters. Instead, Bill and Frank are allowed to grow old together and go out respectively amid an apocalypse. The love story spans particularly the entire episode, is the emotional undercurrent of a major arc in the show, and it's why reviewers are lashing out. Many of the comments on the episode speak out about the episode's agenda, pandering, and alternative motives, and are largely driven by blatant homophobia. I don't know. 27,000 out of those 27,000 reviews, maybe 26,000 were blatant homophobia. I seriously doubt it. I'm pretty sure there were some people in there that just won't accept a homosexual lifestyle. There are those people. Just go to Iran. You'll find them, right? So I believe this is manufactured conflict. The reason people were pissed off about this episode 3, taken by itself, it was a good episode. If this hour and I think 15-minute episode was just by itself as a story, the acting was good, cinematography was good, the background was good, it was intense. It was a good episode. It was like an hour. It was an hour and 15 minutes. It was probably, they spent 30 minutes more time on their relationship relative to the story of this. The story is being told in 9 episodes. You took an entire hour and 15 minutes, basically an hour, to talk about a relationship that was in the game for like 30 seconds at best, right? So it's like, what are you doing? You could there's some black boy and his brother in this that's coming up as well. Now, it would be the same thing if you had the black boy, the older brother, fall in love with some white woman, and they spend the whole episode talking about, showing interracial love or something. It's like, what are you doing? So no one cares about it's 2023. Very few people are adamantly opposed to the point of like going out of their way and picketing against homosexual lifestyle. But here's a way here's some conflict. You take this little piece, this little nugget in the first game and expand it over a whole entire hour. And people are going to be like, what the hell are you doing? Now you get to call those people homophobic. You get it? All right. So there's an example of weaponized altruism. If you don't agree wholeheartedly that this story about two gay men is the most wonderful thing ever, you're homophobic, right? You should fall in love with this because your heart is big and you accept everybody, right? Weaponized altruism. Another thing of weaponized altruism, this is going to lead us into glyphosate, around Monsanto's. Just accept fat people. Just accept them as being beautiful. I'm not, right? I'm old enough to remember Diana Curl, Lena Horne. These are some black, Vanessa Williams, young Holly Berry, right? These are beautiful people, not because they were fat. It was because they knew they had the potential to be some of the most beautiful people on screen if they just limit the amount of ice cream they ate. They got paid for that, right? Now, it's like, hey, man, I'm just going to eat whatever I want, throw on a two-piece bikini. I'm 5'2", 300-something pounds. I'll probably be dead in 5 years from diabetes or less, but I'm beautiful. And if you don't accept me, you're fat shaming. Weaponized altruism. Why would we, America, who dominated in all type of Olympic sports forever, dominating all sports, we got, Mr. Universe coming out of here. You got we were an athletic nation. I mean, all nations were to a degree, but come on, man. We admired the physically fit. Now, all of a sudden, the younger generations are told, you have to accept a person so big, they just can't get out the way, right? They don't stop eating. They eat till they get tired, right? There's no good-looking suit for that person. But we got to accept them. Wonder why? Well, if you consider that 75% of ad revenue on mainstream TV comes from pharmaceuticals, you might find a slight correlation because, according to Stephanie here, who has, I believe, 3 PhDs from MIT, she knows her stuff, so much so that she testified before Congress June 14, 2006. This is on the internet. You guys can go find it, pull it up, the slides, right? So she used the slides when she was testifying before Congress. Now, this is a new childhood in America. Now, remember, she wrote this was presented in 2014. 1 in 3 is overweight. 1 in 6 has learning disabilities. 1 in 9 has asthma. 1 in 10 has ADHD. 1 in 12 has food allergies. I grew up, Gen X knows, when you went to school, nobody had a peanut allergy. Nobody. Like maybe one. I don't recall elementary, junior high, high school. And I went to a really big high school, right? 2,400 students, well, decent size, 2,400 students. I don't recall anybody with a peanut allergy. I'm just being honest. Went to college. I don't recall somebody telling me they can't eat peanuts. But the younger generation, they have grown up in a world where every other person has a peanut allergy. Right? What happened? All right, then you got 1 in 20 has seizures. Fortunately, I don't know anyone who has seizures. My dog has seizures. Ugh, that's bad. 1 in 54 males has autism. 1 in 68 now. That's awesome. And that was as of 2014. 50%, half of all children have chronic illness or are overweight. This is the new normal in our country, right? U.S. health status. We make up 5% of the world population, but consume 50% of pharmaceutical drugs. And I'm gonna skip down to what is outlined in red here. We consume 25% of the world's supply of glyphosate. America is dying at the highest rate in more than a decade. Autism prevalence in 6-year-olds. I want you guys to check out the date. Glyphosate is the red line, right? I'll give you a second to take that in. Then we're going to go on. Mortality rate. We're at the top. Glyphosate in corn. Now, if you say, well, look, Dre, I don't even eat corn. I ain't worried about it. You do eat corn. It's in everything you eat, right? Because corn, high fructose corn syrup is in everything. It's even in your beer, right? You can't get away. If you're in America, I don't know how you get away from glyphosate. They use it in every crop, right? Except for, shout out to North Coast Brewery of California, who makes Rasputin. Last I've heard, and Sierra Nevada, they don't use glyphosate when harvesting their oats, wheats, and barleys and stuff. But other than that, man, if it's mass produced, Cheerios, bread from McDonald's, buns from McDonald's, it has glyphosate in it. Glyphosate is not only in your food, it's in the playgrounds your kids play in the dog parks you take your new children to. I say America has become so poor via inflation that we can't afford children, so we get dogs. Obesity in the U.S. over time. 1700s, when everybody was working in the fields, living hand to mouth damn near, to 1900, you start to see things pick up a bit, but in the 1900s, everybody, 90% of people had something to do with farming, right? You either grew stuff in your backyard when you went out and worked in the factory, but you had that connection with the earth in your mouth, basically. And then right around the 1970s, in fact, 1975, when glyphosate was introduced into the food chain, boom, to the moon. Obesity just goes off the hook, right? So for those, like I said, Gen X is the battleground. Most of us, I would say the vast majority of Gen X were raised on a diet without glyphosate for some portion of our life, a couple of years, a decade. But after that, right, all our food has glyphosate in it. And we got all these chronic illnesses, diseases. You're dependent on the pharmaceutical companies, again, who, if you're watching mainstream TV, 75% of their revenue comes from pharmaceuticals. So why would they tell fat people to look into why they're fat? Isn't it better for them to just tell everybody else to accept them as being fat? Because if you start to look into why they're fat, people will start to look at stuff like this and say, it's your fault. Then what happens? Thought experiment. If you think that McDonald's quarter pounder or whatever costs a lot today with inflation, imagine if we stopped using glyphosate to harvest our food. A Big Mac will probably cost you $50, right? Glyphosate does bring the cost of harvesting down. So there's a bit of cost benefit to that. The other cost detriment is your health, okay? Now, in Europe, it's illegal to use it. So for those who may have allergies like gluten sensitivity, that came across my plate about 10 years ago. I was like, oh, drinking beer, getting an allergic reaction, hard to breathe a little bit. So somebody said, you might be gluten sensitive. So what I did was cut out wheat and, gluten for about a week. And I was like, oh my God, what a difference. But then someone told me, you know what? I bet you if you ate some pasta from Italy or, pasta with dough made from Italy, or, just get a hold of some food made in Europe where it's illegal to use glyphosate, food meaning, with wheat in it. See how that affects you. And lo and behold, oh my God, it doesn't affect me nearly as much, right? So beers from Europe don't use glyphosate. None of the wheats and things like that don't use glyphosate in Europe, but in America, Canada, I believe, the United Kingdom, they still do. So gliosulfate, back to the chart here, altruism, gliosulfate, vaccine reactions, right? They didn't say vaccine, they said vaccine reaction. So you get the vaccine, you get gliosulfate, put them together, boom. This is what she's saying. I'm not going to read this, but genetically engineered crops, gliosulfate, and the deterioration of health in America and the United States. There's a paper written about this, 2014. Annual incidence of diabetes. Just look at gliosulfate applied to corn and soil, right? In this orange line here. Look at the dates, 89. So they said gliosulfate got into the food supply around 75, but it didn't take over the food supply overnight, right? Probably about 80s, 80, 85, that's when everything had gliosulfate in it and we just didn't know it. Then you got end-stage renal cancers, you got death from intestinal infections. Just look at the chart, right? Inflammatory bowel disease, just look at the chart. Thyroid cancer, death from, I remember when I was a kid, you had a couple of people with, they would call it dementia, right? But now it's like, it seems it's like everybody got it. At least all the commercials say everybody got it. Death due to obesity. Now look at this, 1979. That should have been, that was the trend, pre-1993, trend. We should be under the 20 over here on the right side. But unfortunately, look at this red line here. So, gliosulfate, pathways to modern diseases, part 2, celiac, I ain't gonna even try. Gliosulfate and celiac disease. Check the dates, go back to 1990, and then you start the spike. All right, heart disease, lymph node system, newborn blood disorders, right? Sleep disorders, ADHD, anxiety. You can blame, they're going to have robbery and burglary on here in a minute. You can blame everything on gliosulfate, right? So again, you know, people who control the narrative, meaning people who control the distribution of our values, right? They have put into that stream, the narrative stream, consider it as a river, in order to get us to accept these new set of values, they've implemented a strategy called weaponized altruism. The purpose of that is social conflict. One, keeps you distracted from the real issue. Obesity is a health concern. It is an aesthetic concern, but it's definitely a health concern. So instead of us saying, hey, big girl, big boy, you should really diet because it's dangerous, right? And we know that it's hard for you to lose weight because of the gliosulfate in your food. Instead of us doing that and trying to solve the problem of gliosulfate in the food, we are told to accept that via the media, games, and stuff like that. So that's why I believe, I'm gonna say it again, Gen X is the battleground for this culture war. And I think we've already lost it, to be honest. I'm sorry, I wish I had better news for you. I don't see a way out of this. I really don't see a path out of this. I mean, when Elon Musk bought Twitter, I was like, okay, there's something, you know, there's something. But several months later, I'm just like, you know, you get all this bad stuff that's being exposed. Maybe I just need to be patient, but I don't see nothing really happening because people like you followed the Twitter files, but your friends, family, they don't know anything about it. And those people go and vote for the Bidens of the world who just get on TV and just lie to American public. And they're just like, oh, we're just soaking in, right? Last but not least, what's the purpose of this? I'm saying we already lost the culture war. Well, why is there a war being fought? Well, there are people out there who envision a one world government that they run or he runs, right? Or it won't be these people. They may claim, gender equality and all that stuff. At the end of the day, it's going to be some white dude trying to run the country. I don't know why he has to be white, but I ain't seen no black person try to pull this off yet. Everybody who's tried to pull off a one world government happens to be Caucasian. This doesn't mean all white people trying to run, be the ruler of the world. I'm just saying in this group of people who have these dreams of running the world happen to come from a certain racial dynamic. What's in their way? You're in their way. You and that belief in the First Amendment and the Second Amendment. As long as the First Amendment and Second Amendment is there, America, the remnants of it, is enough. It's enough. The First and Second Amendment right is enough to hold them off, right? Well, how do you get rid of the First and Second Amendment? No one's crazy enough to invade America and destroy the Constitution. You have to destroy it from within, right? How do you destroy it from within? Social conflict. Well, how do you implement social conflict? Weaponized altruism. Another example of weaponized altruism is this cartoon Daphne from Scooby-Doo. They flipped all the characters around. So Daphne's, I believe, a black lesbian. Shaggy's a black dude. The white guy in the show, I believe, is some rich guy who can't do anything on his own. Velma is a mean chick, I believe. So basically, they're trying, the narrative being pushed is everything about the past, everything that we cherish as Gen Xers and our parents deemed okay because these cartoons, they were instilling in the children the same values their parents instilled. But now Daphne, Velma, and all these people are trying to say that these values are correct. And the fact that these values were not instilled in Gen X means everything that Gen X valued is suspect. So you get conflict. Y'all sent y'all kids to school and they came back with some, especially during Black History Month, some homework that you like, what? Like the CRT stuff is like, what? So now we all hate each other based on race? Like, what's going on? So this is purposeful stuff. This is a weapon that I don't have an answer for. I can just say, notice it and don't get caught up in it. So, like The Last of Us, episode 3, they spent a whole hour, I'm spending a lot of time on this video talking about this, about a relationship that was beautifully portrayed or whatever, but took up way too much time. And that's evidenced by episode 4, where it felt rushed. They didn't have enough time to bond, because episode 4 was like a bonding episode between Joel and Ellie. It was apparent to me they didn't have enough time to build an organic bond. Right? They added stuff that wasn't in the game to have a bonding scene. Where in the game, they bonded organically through conflict, right? But they chose to spend 60 minutes on this relationship between two men instead of organically showing Ellie's and Joel's relationship bonding via conflict. All right, I think I've talked too much. I know I've left some stuff out. Capitalism. And this is it. One of the values was competition in the marketplace, and no matter when we were growing up, no matter if you were black, white, gay, or straight. Now, if you were gay back when I was growing up, you were likely in the closet, right? It was hard for you to be out, It was just hard. But even if you were gay, you value competition in the marketplace. You value God, country, family, right? These were you valued the victor. You may have been victimized, but you because of your status, but and this is I'm not pretending to speak for gay people, but one of my dear friends, good friends, he's gay, in Gen X, he's married to a guy. We were talking about this, and he said he thought it was a generational thing, and that's what led me to doing this video. I almost forgot. Jeez. I'm running along here. But he was saying like the older gay generation just can't he don't know what the hell's going on with these young kids. Their values are different. Right? You can't tell me Tim Cook, the head of Apple, who I believe is gay, shares the same these communist, Marxist, economic values that these young kids do. He didn't grow up with those values. He didn't become the CEO, what's his name? Apple's former CEO didn't choose him to run the show because he thought like a socialist, right? So again, Gen X is the battleground. I think maybe if we're just if we realize what's going on and we can point out to other people the social conflict that's being used against us, weaponized altruism that's being used against us, maybe we can slow this tide. If not, all those people who last night who watched Joe Biden and believed everything he said, gonna vote in all type of policies that's just gonna destroy what's left of America. With that said, I'll talk to y'all later. If you've been here this long, please check me out on the Hangout. It's later tonight. Today is Feb the 8th. I'll probably release this after the show. So it should be a link to that show in this by the time you see it. With that, peace. I'm out.